What if the true battlefield is not a stretch of scorched earth, but a maze of shadowy corridors where bureaucrats and generals, advisors and analysts wage a relentless struggle against the dead weight of their own institutions? Imagine a war where the crash of artillery and drone swarms is only a faint echo of the real conflict. A hidden war in which the fate of nations is decided by how fast they can adapt, not just how hard they can fight. On the night of October the 26th, while the front lines blazed and trembled beneath a storm of missiles and drone attacks, an even more consequential drama was unfolding far from the cameras. In Kyiv and Moscow, in command centers shielded by concrete and secrecy, both Ukraine and Russia were launching the most ambitious military reforms since the opening days of the invasion. This was not a matter of routine adjustments. It was the start of an all-or-nothing campaign to rebuild their war machines from within, to survive a conflict that no longer resembles the wars of the past. Ukraine, battered by months of relentless attrition and the loss of key strongholds, has begun to dismantle its famed brigade-based command in favor of a corps-based structure, a change that echoes the very system used by its Russian adversary. In parallel, Russia, long infamous for its labyrinthine bureaucracy and stifling paperwork, has declared its own war against inefficiency. Its leadership, under Defense Minister Belousov, is racing to strip away layers of red tape, determined to outpace Ukraine not merely on the battlefield, but in the speed and agility of its entire military infrastructure. The cost of failure in these internal revolutions is difficult to overstate. The lives of tens of thousands hang in the balance. The security of entire nations could be lost, not in a blaze of gunfire, but in the slow suffocation of outdated systems. Should these reforms succeed, they might not only decide the outcome of the war, but rewrite the principles of warfare for the 21st century. Any nation watching from afar would do well to pay attention, for the lessons now being written in blood and frustration may define the wars of tomorrow. Why have these backstage transformations become so urgent now? What triggered this race to reinvent? To answer that, we must revisit a single, shocking night, the moment when the illusion of stability shattered and the old ways were exposed as dangerously obsolete. It was a night when the familiar symphony of distant explosions gave way to something far more sinister. A coordinated barrage of Russian-guided bombs and drones struck Ukrainian positions near Kherson, catching an entire battalion off guard. Eyewitness accounts from officers and survivors describe the chaos with chilling clarity. Men scrambling for cover, orders lost in the din, units dissolving into confusion as communications failed and leadership vanished. The aftermath was devastating. Hundreds killed or scattered, a vital sector of the Ukrainian line suddenly defenseless. This was not an isolated disaster. Simultaneously, Russian advances in Zaporizhzhia and the fall of Pokrovsk, once considered an impregnable fortress, signaled that the old model of a stable, linear front had collapsed. What had once seemed like a war of position was morphing into a war of unpredictability, with shifting lines, collapsing defensive nodes, and a tempo that outpaced traditional command structures. In the days that followed, both armies were forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. No amount of heroism or high-tech weaponry could compensate for inert, outdated command systems. Generals and ministers across both sides began an urgent audit of their organizations, identifying bottlenecks, rewriting decades-old procedures, and hunting for the invisible cancers of bureaucracy that threatened to choke every decision. The race was no longer for ground, but for organizational speed. In this new war of attrition, the boldest side would win not only by fighting, but by learning and adapting faster than the enemy. Think of the German blitzkrieg in World War II, where rapid, flexible command outmatched slower, more cumbersome foes. Or recall the United States Army's painful, but ultimately transformative shift to modular brigades after the chaos of early Iraq. Each historic leap in military effectiveness came not from new tanks or planes alone, but from new ways of thinking about command, logistics, and adaptation. Today, Ukraine and Russia are each betting their futures on just such a leap. For Ukraine, The move to a core structure is nothing less than a gamble for national survival. What, exactly, does this mean? And what risks lurk beneath the promise of streamlined command? A core system, in military terms, is a level of organization above the brigade or division, a formation large enough to control tens of thousands of troops, coordinate multiple divisions, and execute sustained, large-scale operations. It centralizes decision-making, improves resource management, and, in theory, allows for more efficient logistics. The United States and Russian armies have long relied on such structures to manage sprawling theaters of war. But for Ukraine, the transition is fraught with peril. Unlike the professional armies that pioneered corps-level warfare, Ukraine faces a chronic shortage of experienced officers and even basic manpower. Years of relentless combat have depleted its ranks of veterans. Many command posts are occupied by newly promoted, often inexperienced officers. Some units exist on paper only, their ranks filled with green recruits or left vacant due to casualties and desertion. Imagine, for a moment, the difference between a skeleton and a living body. The core structure provides the bones, but without muscle, well-trained troops, seasoned leaders, and reliable logistics, those bones cannot move. There is a risk that Ukraine's new core could become hollow shells, impressive in diagrams, but dangerously brittle in reality. History is filled with examples of armies that appeared formidable on paper, only to collapse when their structures were not matched by substance. The Iraqi army in 2003, for instance, disintegrated despite its imposing order of battle because its units were hollow and its command paralyzed. This shift for Ukraine is also an admission that the war has changed. Early in the conflict, Ukraine's nimble, flexible brigades and ad hoc units excelled at rapid maneuvers, ambushes, and intelligence-driven raids, methods that played to the defenders' strengths. But as the front lines hardened, with Russian artillery and drones grinding down positions day after day, speed and agility gave way to the grim logic of attrition. Static lines, constant barrages, and the slow erosion of manpower now define the fight. In this new environment, Ukraine's leaders hope the core system will enable their army to absorb punishment, plug gaps, and coordinate defense over vast stretches of contested territory. Yet the risks remain daunting. Every new corps demands thousands of additional soldiers, hundreds of officers, and a supporting web of logistics, intelligence, and medical units. Ukraine's population, already strained by mobilization and war fatigue, may struggle to supply these needs. If the reforms outpace recruitment and training, the result could be overextended, ineffective formations, ripe for exploitation by an adversary that is watching closely for every weakness. Take, for example, the Soviet Red Army's hasty expansion in 1941. Though they fielded massive numbers of divisions and corps, the lack of trained officers and coherent logistics led to disaster when the German Wehrmacht struck. Units crumbled not for lack of courage, but because their new structures were hollow. Ukraine's reformers know this history well and are racing against time to avoid repeating it. If, however, Ukraine can stabilize its defenses with these new corps, even holding the line for months at a time, every day bought becomes a small victory. Time, in a war of exhaustion, is measured not only in territory, but in the ability to endure, replace losses, and adapt. A stabilized front buys breathing room for training, procurement, and potential diplomatic maneuvering. But the margin for error is razor-thin. If the core system proves to be a facade, the collapse could be sudden and catastrophic, threatening the very survival of the Ukrainian state. While Ukraine struggles to build a new command structure in the heat of battle, Russia is waging a different, yet equally vital campaign, a relentless assault on its own inefficiency and corruption. For decades, the Russian military has been notorious for its Byzantine bureaucracy, endless forms, duplicative approvals, and a culture of paperwork that often stifles initiative. This is more than a nuisance. In modern war, delays in supplies, medical care, and communication can cost lives and lose battles. History offers many cautionary tales, from the collapse of logistics in the Red Army during the Winter War with Finland, to the infamous supply problems that plagued Soviet forces in Afghanistan. Under the direction of Defense Minister Belousov, Russia has now embarked on an unprecedented reform drive, targeting every layer of military support. The goal is simple: transform the sprawling, paper-choked bureaucracy into a streamlined, digital, data-driven engine of war. This is not just a matter of replacing clipboards with tablets. It is a total re-engineering of how orders are given, tracked, and fulfilled. The backbone of this revolution is digitalization. Every aspect of logistics, from ammunition orders and fuel requests to medical evacuation and equipment repair, is being integrated into a unified digital network. The vision is for any frontline commander, at any hour, to request supplies or reinforcements and receive a real-time, trackable response. Gone are the days, at least in theory, when a supply request might disappear into the ether, or when medical aid could be delayed by days due to lost paperwork. Consider the practical impact. A soldier wounded on the front can now be tracked from the moment of injury through evacuation, treatment, and recovery, with each step monitored and optimized for speed. Families of fallen soldiers receive benefits with fewer bureaucratic hurdles, a crucial factor in maintaining morale and public support. Procurement, long a source of corruption and delay, is being reformed for greater transparency, with competitive bidding and digital oversight. Even the repair of tanks and vehicles is being sped up, with parts tracked in real time and maintenance teams dispatched via automated systems. These reforms are not mere window dressing. Early results indicate that supply chains have become markedly faster, with frontline units reporting a reduction in downtime from days to hours. Commanders are empowered to make decisions without waiting for multiple signatures, and the flow of information from the front to high command is more immediate than ever before. Of course, resistance persists. Deep-rooted habits and entrenched interests do not vanish overnight. Some officers, wary of change, drag their feet or look for loopholes. Others fear that too much automation might lead to new vulnerabilities, such as cyber attacks or loss of human judgment in complex situations. In the Soviet era, reforms often stumbled on the rock of "not invented here" syndrome, an attitude still alive in parts of the Russian military establishment. But the stakes are too high for inertia to win. In a war of attrition, the side that can deliver ammunition, repair tanks, and care for the wounded with speed and efficiency gains a decisive advantage. History is replete with examples. In World War II, the American Red Ball Express kept Patton's tanks moving across France, outpacing even the best German defenses. In the Gulf War, the United States Army's logistical agility allowed for rapid advances and minimized casualties. Today, Russia hopes that its digital reforms will give it similar resilience and speed. Yet this, too, is a gamble. If the reforms succeed, the Russian military may become not only harder to disrupt, but more adaptive and lethal. If they fail, if bureaucracy reasserts itself, or if digital systems introduce new chaos, the consequences could be dire. Frontline units might find themselves stranded, wounded soldiers left waiting, and critical opportunities lost. The duel between these two reform agendas, Ukraine's core transformation and Russia's digital revolution, may well shape the next phase of the war more than any single tank battle or missile strike. Modern war is no longer just a contest of guns and armor. Victory belongs to the side that can rewire its entire machine, adapting to shocks and surprises faster than the enemy. Every new conflict, from Afghanistan to Syria to the South China Sea, exposes the hidden weaknesses of armies and governments. Those that survive are not always the strongest, but the quickest to learn, the most willing to change, and the best at empowering leaders to act on real-time information. Seemingly mundane reforms, automating paperwork, streamlining logistics, ensuring families of soldiers are cared for, can spell the difference between resilience and collapse. If a state cannot get ammunition to the front, repair vehicles, or evacuate the wounded, it will falter, no matter how bravely its troops fight. The great surprise of the 21st century is that success in war may hinge less on new weapons than on new ways of organizing people and information. Consider, for example, Israel's rapid adaptation during the Yom Kippur War, where flexible command and innovative logistics turned the tide against a larger enemy. Or South Korea's transformation after the Korean War, evolving from a rigid top-down army to a highly adaptive force capable of responding to modern threats. These stories echo what is now at stake in Ukraine and Russia, the battle to reform, to adapt, and to survive. The principles emerging from this hidden contest are relevant not just to generals, but to anyone facing crisis. In peacetime disasters, earthquakes, pandemics, financial crashes, the societies that respond best are those with agile, resilient systems and leaders empowered to act on rapidly changing information. War, in this sense, is the harshest school for the future of governance and resilience. So as headlines focus on explosions and burning towns, the true contest may be unfolding in silence. The race between Ukraine's and Russia's reforms, between agility and inertia, between innovation and tradition, will shape not only the outcome of this war, but the fate of their societies for decades to come. When the last gun falls silent, history often remembers not the loudest victories, but the quiet revolutions that made them possible. In the shattered cities and fields of Ukraine, the world sees only the clash of armies. But beneath the surface, a deeper struggle is underway, a race to adapt, to learn, and to outlast. Inside fortified command centers, Ukrainian and Russian planners rewrite doctrines, tear down old habits, and try to outrun the inertia of their own institutions. The winner will not be the side with the most tanks, but the side that transforms fastest, cutting through bureaucracy, turning every setback into a lesson, harnessing data, and building supply lines that can withstand the long grind of attrition. For Ukraine, the move to a core structure is more than a bureaucratic shuffle. It is a bold attempt to match an adversary's strengths, to centralize power, and to give ground commanders the resources they need to fight and survive. For Russia, the battle is just as urgent, an all-out push to drag a cumbersome, paper-bound war machine into the digital age before it is too late. These reforms are not the stuff of headlines. They do not trend on social media. But every command clarified, every system modernized, every lesson absorbed in real time. These are the changes that win wars in the modern era. The side that adapts quicker, learns faster, and dares to reinvent itself under fire will hold the keys to survival. We are witnessing a conflict in which the most decisive weapons are invisible. Innovation, speed of decision-making, and the willingness to change when the world is crumbling around you. The stakes could not be higher. The lives of thousands, the future of nations, and the fate of their institutions all depend not just on courage at the front, but on the relentless drive to evolve behind the scenes. Before we judge this war by maps or casualty counts, we must look deeper. In this era, victory belongs to those who treat bureaucracy as another battlefield, who turn confusion into strength, and who wield every reform as a weapon. The lessons written now, in the shadows, in the corridors, in the relentless march of adaptation, may shape not only the outcome of this war, but the future of every nation watching from afar. So as the world watches Ukraine and Russia, the real question is not just who will win the next battle, but which side will learn, adapt, and reform fast enough to shape the peace that follows. In the end, the silent contest to reinvent may prove to be the most decisive front of all.